Hi, my name is Manish Gupta, and in this video, I'm going to talk about open vocab extreme classification using generative models. So let's get started. Specifically, I'm going to talk about T5. So is it possible to use T5 for doing open vocabulary extreme classification or extreme multi-level classification? Okay, so let me first concretely define what is this open vocabulary extreme multi-level classification. Right? So the idea is that it is a kind of an extreme classification setting, which basically means that the number of labels are in millions, right? It's a multi-level classification problem where the number of labels are in millions. But then the idea is that given a data point, here you can predict a set of labels, some of which may be outside of the known tag set. So some of these classes, of course, the number of classes are in millions, but then some of these classes may be unseen at train time completely. So they just appear at test time. Okay, so that is why it's called open vocabulary extreme multi-level classification. So specifically in this paper, people have presented a new technique called as GROOV, which stands for generative out of vocabulary tagging, where the idea is to fine-tune a sequence-to-sequence learning model like T5 for doing open vocab extreme multi-level classification. Okay. So the idea is that they use T5, they basically provide the data point as input to T5, and then the T5 model is supposed to produce a set of labels, right? A set of labels as a flat sequence. Now, it's not as straightforward as that because in general, which particular sequence is better? I mean, do you expect ranking out of this sequence and so on are questions to be answered, right? So GROOV is trained using a novel loss independent of the predicted label order. So in fact, in this paper, people argue that several applications do not really need a ranked order over labels, but are okay with a set of labels. So essentially, how do you predict the set of labels is the question. Okay. So now the way the training is done so as to have a loss independent of the predicted label order, the way the training is done is as follows. Given a particular data point xi and a set of tags yi. Okay, so at train time, of course, you know the set of tags yi which are relevant for this particular data point, right? And a random perturbation pi, a random permutation pi. So it's a permutation of the set of tags, right? The model is expected to return an ordered list of the elements of yi. So let's say if you have like three different labels A, B, C, if you basically decide a permutation such that essentially BAC is the order, then the model is supposed to take that permutation, 2, 1, 3, and then output BAC appropriately. Okay. So the model has to predict the concatenation of the appropriate tags in the order defined by the permutation. And this basically is a label order invariant training objective. So essentially, this ensures that the labels that are generated, so the model does not really bother about the label order for the appropriate loss, but basically just the model is just supposed to return the set of tags. The sequence does not matter. Okay. So at inference time, what happens? So at inference time, it is pretty naive and straightforward. So you basically just give the data point as input. You of course don't have the set of tags to give it as input. So you give the data point as input and you expect it to basically generate labels. So once the model has generated labels by always taking most likely next token and decoding step, you essentially split the tokens based on a separator token, which basically gives you the set of strings or the set of labels that are predicted by the model. Now, the set of strings that are predicted by the model may not really be a part of the label set. So because because it's a T5 model, so it also has world knowledge. So therefore, based on that, it may come up with things which are out of the vocabulary of the label set. But that's what is expected because after all, it's open vocab XMC. So that's what you expect it. You expect it to come up with labels which were not a part of the training set at all. Okay. Now, to be able to compute these metrics like precision at k and PSP at k, you need some label ordering. So you use the order in which the model produces the labels and therefore use that so as to come up with this ranking kind of thing so as to get P at k, precision at k, or PSP at k. Okay. Now, this is also reasonable. However, this leads to some trouble. So essentially, let me talk about the trouble. So let's say if there were gold labels ABC, three labels, and let's say if your permutation was BAC at train time, right? So then you expect the model to base and let the logits corresponding to BAC be ZA, ZB, and ZC. Now you expect the model to essentially give very high probability to ZB and very low logit score for ZA and ZC. If that does not happen, or other very low probability to the first token of A or C, right? You want the model to give very high probability to the first token of B. Okay. If that doesn't happen, you of course penalize the model using the typical softmax formulation. So you want basically this probability to be very high. Otherwise, you will have to penalize the model. Okay. But that's not very nice because after all, A and C are also golden labels. So I mean, it should be okay to expect the model to predict any golden label for that matter. Okay. So that is why they bring in this new loss function called as multi-softmax loss. So before computing cross entropy, this the softmax, what it does is to not penalize if any first tokens of true labels. These are two labels. So any first tokens of these two labels are predicted regardless of the label order. Okay. So it basically says that if G is my set of two labels, then I'm going to basically sum over all of those. And then in the denominator, I'm basically just going to sum over everything, all kinds of tokens. And then if the model is predicting any of these first tokens of any of the gold labels, I'm not going to penalize it. I'm going to actually consider it as in the numerator. Okay, so that's the multi-softmax loss. And I mean, because XMC, I mean, because they treat the XMC problem as generating a set of labels for a data point, this kind of a setting makes complete sense. Okay. So how do you score labels? Now, the idea is that, yes, I mean, they basically said that the order in which the model predicts the labels, that is the way you're going to use them for all these position-based metrics. Okay. But the position-based metrics do not require the score, but some applications may require the score. For example, I may only want to, output labels if they pass a certain threshold. Okay. So if I also want the score associated with the label, unfortunately, it's difficult to get that, right? Because a label may span several tokens, and then after all, the entire set of labels are being generated as a single sequence. So therefore, they use a simple heuristic to score labels. They essentially run a beam search while decoding with beam size is B. So therefore, at any point, for any test instance, they're going to generate, let's say, B equal to 10 different sequences. And now these are label sequences, remember, and they're separated by a separated token. So therefore, now if you have to basically figure out the probability of a particular label Li, they basically sum over all the beams. So they basically say that let me sum over all the beam probabilities where where the beam actually contains the label. So if the label is contained in the beam, you essentially take all of such beams and take their marginal probability sum, and that's basically the score for the particular label. Okay, so that's how they basically compute a score for a label. Now, how does this T5-based open vocabulary XMC perform? Okay, so they experiment with the T5-based and T5 large models. So they also, another contribution of this paper is basically matrix on is to think about matrix on unseen labels. So remember now there is a set of seen labels and there's a set of unseen labels. So for unseen labels, they compute precision recall. They also compute something called as NLSR for unseen labels. NLSR is actually defined as follows. It's a very intuitive metric. It basically stands for novel label set recall. And by the name itself, you should be able to understand that it's going to capture how many unseen labels in the test set has the model produced at least once, while predicting. Okay, so what does NLSR, compute? Well, it computes how many unseen labels the test set has the model produced at least once. Okay, so these are the metrics on the unseen labels. Now they have so since they're generating labels, sometimes it happens that the generated text actually is very similar to an existing label, although it is different in terms of existing labels in terms of spelling, hyphenation, pluralization, lexical form, or capitalization. Okay, so therefore they also introduce some soft matching based metrics. So they basically introduce, in fact, two different soft matching based metrics: a lexical syntactic matrix and a semantic matrix. So the soft lexical precision and recall are dependent on this match criteria. So if the edit distance between the predicted label and the actual label is lesser than the length of the predicted label divided by 10 plus 1, then you consider it as a match. Okay. Similarly, for soft semantic precision and recall, they essentially use BERT score. And if the BERT score is greater than 0.94, you consider them as a match. Okay. Now, so these are the results that you see on the right side on Wikipedia, 1 million data set. More results are present in the paper on more data sets. But they actually compare GROOV with various other previous extreme classification methods, including Zest XML, which had been proposed for a very similar setting of open zero shot, in some senses zero shot extreme classification. Okay. So, and what you see here is are methods or variants of GROOV with appropriate changes like sorted, like you sort by marginal probabilities, the label sequences. You also do modified softmax, the multi softmax thing, right? And finally, if you also use T5 large, then you essentially get the best PSP values that you see here for this data set. However, note that these PSP values are not as good as, let's say, the ZEST XML values. So if you basically look at the typical extreme classification methods, well, it's not beating those methods completely, but it is better than several other methods. So if you look at many other attention XML, Parable, and so on, it's actually better than several other methods. Okay. Now, on the unseen labels part, these are the results on the unseen labels, so unseen label matrix. So as you see, the NLSR prediction score, they basically put up the NLSR prediction scores for 1, 3, and 5, and well, it's basically saying that hey, at 5, you basically can obtain about 16% of the unseen labels in the test set were sort of recovered or recalled by the model at least once. Okay. Now, of course, these metrics cannot be compared with the other methods because other methods cannot really do zero-shot kind of stuff or cannot work for unseen labels, and therefore they just provide their results. Now, on the semantic on the soft matching matrix part, essentially, as you observe, the soft matching matrix, they basically put up recall and precision soft matching matrix, exact match or lexical match or semantic match. So exact match is not soft match, right? It's exact match, while lexical and semantic matches are soft matches. And what you observe is that, yes, if you basically give it a little bit of a leeway in terms of doing soft matches, then you do see significant gains compared to the exact match. Okay. So lastly, now OXMC, the main selling point of this method is that it helps you to find new tags or new labels for existing data points, right? Even those which have not been presented in the training set at all. Okay. So here is an example which shows something of that kind. So here is the input paragraph, and for this particular input text, you want to basically come up with with labels. Okay. Now, what you observe is that the model is able to predict these green ones, beauty, makeup, and eyes, which are already existing in the label set, right? They have been also they were also present in the in the training set, and it has been able to predict them pretty nicely. Okay. So if you really, so yellow basically here means exact match. So these are exact matches. So these are the ground truth labels. And as you see, 3 of those ground truth labels have been nicely predicted by the algorithm. Okay. Now, the other label is eyebrow color. And if you basically think about it, well, eyebrow color has not been exactly figured out. But if I compare it with eyebrow, well, it is somewhat related, right? So essentially, therefore, I can safely say that if I look at it from a syntactic or a semantic match perspective, well, eyebrow color has been somewhat predicted by the model in that sense. Okay. Now, on the other hand, the model is able to actually come up with really nice new labels like eyebrows, eyebrow pencils, eyebrow treatments, which were not there in the train set at all. So these are essentially sensible as well as informative labels, which were not present in the train set at all. Okay, so therefore, this is the value add that OXMC provides. It basically comes up with labels which are which are new, novel, and they are still sensible and informative to be used as tags for the existing data points. Okay. So in fact, more quantitatively, right? They found that OXMC, the T5 model, essentially 89% of the times it is acting dumb. It basically just copies or creates plural forms of some input n-gram. So from the input text, it basically just take some words like this and essentially just comes up with exactly those words or their plural forms. But 11% of the times it basically does magic. It basically creatively composes information from across the entire item description. It just doesn't copy some words or phrases. Okay. Now, also what they found is that amongst the new generated labels, 65% of them are sensible and 26% of them are both sensible as well as informative. Thereby, sort of saying that if you basically use OXMC, it is a good method to be able to generate new labels for existing data points. Okay, so in summary, in this video, I talked about this open vocabulary XMC task, which is a task where at test time you can actually have many more labels, even when the label set is in millions. Okay, new labels in when the label set is in millions. And I also talked about this new technique called as GROOV. It basically is a sequence to set of sequence kind of model. Basically, we use T5 model. They also showed results with BART, and then they showed that it didn't really perform that well. So T5 performs well. Okay. So GROOV can tag textual content with a set of labels from an open vocabulary. Okay. And this paper also contributed in terms of new metrics for unseen labels, specifically, precision and recall for unseen labels, and also this NLSR metric, which basically cares about the recall from the unseen label set. Okay. So they also proposed, well, some of these semantic match metrics, although the metrics are old, but nobody else seems to have sort of computed semantic match metrics for the extreme classification world. So they provided some results for semantic match metrics as well. That's it for this video. Hope you liked the video. Thank you for watching. Connect with me on my LinkedIn or look at my research on my